Howdy. Welcome back to Dion Talk. Rent control. 3 reasons why this hit my radar. First, Biden's plan. Second, Washington State also has a bill being proposed for rent control. And if you're interested in supporting or opposing it, it is House Bill 1388. And third, the reason why rent control hit my radar is I'm actually on my way to help a friend with an open house for a rental unit that she's turning over. I asked her how she set her rents, and she said she found area average and actually went a bit above that, because if rent control happens, she won't be able to raise it in the future. So what I want to talk about is how rent control hurts renters and helps owners. I mean, what's the goal of rent control, right? It's to protect tenants from gouging, and what it actually does is increases rents and creates fewer rentals. I reached financial freedom and retired early by investing in buy and hold real estate, making me a landlord, which is a weird word. So most people think I wouldn't like rent control. And they would be right, but not for the reason that people think. Rent control screws over tenants and makes owners rich. The immediate impact is rents going up. Just the bill being introduced causes owners to increase rent just in case it passes. Here's an example. Not a hypothetical, but my actual example. I've had rentals a bit over a decade, and here's how I handle rent. For most years, I did a 5% increase every other year, meaning an average of 2.5% a year. But the tenants got a year with no change, and then one with a 5% change. This keeps me in line, or at least it kept me in line, with increases in expenses like insurance and property taxes and labor and material costs. But in 2020 and 2021, there was some craziness. And expenses shot up. Insurance doubled. Property taxes went up about 30%. Supply chain issues and labor costs went up. So in order to run a business and not go bankrupt, rents went up more than 5%. The idea with rent control is to stop a business owner like me from making a larger adjustment when costs go up. So what does this force the owner to do? And how does rent control make the owner a lot richer? Since I wouldn't have the option to adjust when I have a black swan event like we did in 2020, I would be forced to do the maximum allowable increase every year. In California, that would be 5% plus inflation with a cap of 10% a year. While Biden has proposed a plan for nationwide rent control, it's kind of unlikely to pass since right now we have a divided government. Here in Washington State, it's a little more likely that this bill makes it through, so I will again use my example. The bill in Washington is proposing a cap of 7%. So as an owner, instead of 5% every other year and having happy tenants, I would do 7% each year. Since my hands are tied, and I don't have the option to do an adjustment if another black swan event ever happens, or something that makes costs go up significantly. So my tenants, for a decade, without rent control, had that 5% increase every other year. With rents averaging $2,000 in my area, I have some 3 bedrooms that rent for more, I have some 2 bedrooms that rent for less, but the average being $2,000, my rents would go up $100 every other year. So basically $50 a year if you average it out. Now, if rent control was here for the last decade, I would have raised rents 7% or $140 a year every year. Rent control literally tripled my rent increases. So now we see how rent control benefits owners. And someone is typing out right now how not all landlords raise rents like me, and the idea is to stop the ones who do it differently. So I have 2 more examples. First is my brother with 10 rentals who never raises the rents on his tenants unless they move out. I have a friend with 30 rentals and he hasn't raised the rents on some tenants that moved in 2005. But if rent control goes into effect, not only will they have to raise it every single year, but they're going to have to do a massive jump just before it goes into effect. So running a business, imagine if a bill came out that would triple your profit. Who wouldn't vote yes? That's the benefit to the owners. Here are some of the negatives to the renters. First, the rent increases that become constant. Second, it becomes harder to find a rental. in several ways. A lot of owners don't want more regulation, so they get out of the rental business. And the uneducated think, great, because getting out sounds like selling, meaning less landlords. But that isn't how people get out. Most owners do not want rent control so their solution is not to sell their rentals, it's to change their rentals. They go from long-term rentals to short-term rentals, like traveling nurses, or renting to insurance or corporate, or they switch to Airbnb or Vrbo. This means less long-term rentals in an already undersupplied market. Look at Seattle. They lost 3,000 rentals when they instituted something that even sounded like rent control. And supply and demand is undefeated. Less units means higher rents. So when a tenant moves out, owners jack up the rents to the new higher area average. And again, the uneducated go, right. But that stops larger increases on the tenants who don't move. Sometimes tenants don't move. They get moved. Owners have some legal options. They can just not renew the lease in some areas. In others, they can give notice that the owner intends to rehab the unit, or sell the unit, or move into the unit. That gets tenants out and allows the rents to adjust. More tenants move out. Rents just jacked up. All of these things benefit the owner and hurt the tenant. And that isn't the entire list of how rent control damages tenants. Builders aren't building homes out of the kindness of their hearts. They do it for profit. The nightmare of permits and approvals that the builders need to deal with the cities, the municipalities, the counties, and all the regulations that it takes to make that build happen isn't worth it unless there's good profit. If an area has rent control, investors are less likely to want to buy. More regulation makes it harder to run a business, even for people like me who understand that rent control will make me richer. So less demand means builders won't build. Proof is in St. Paul, where they instituted a 3% rent control, which actually impacted new builds. So not only did contractors cancel future plans, they stopped projects they were in the middle of. Less inventory, again, limits the number of rentals, making supply and demand kick in and increase rents again. As an owner, I would get richer if rent control passes in our state. So you would think I would want that. But not today. Today, I want to be a decent human being and not let rent control hurt renters. Owners are already getting rich enough. We don't need to force them to get richer. We need more housing, not more regulation. But if voters pass regulations that make me richer, thank you. Until my next video, thanks for coming to my Dion Talk.